My name is Dr. Aditi Mukherji, and I am the Director of Climate Change Impact Area at the CGIAR. CGIAR is the world's largest public agency for agricultural research. We have over 10,000 scientists in our system with offices in over 100 countries. And we do a lot of work around agricultural innovations and food security, and obviously water is a big part of that system. My background is I have a PhD in human geography, and right from the time I was doing my doctoral thesis, I have focused on water. I have been looking at how institutions and policies. Basically, what I'm curious about is a lot of the work I do is on agricultural water management, and I am very curious about why farmers do what they do in terms of their decision making, particularly their decision making around water management. So that led me to study, and almost always I found the answer to be in the arena of policies and institutions. Farmers, not only in our country, not only in India, but everywhere across the world, are often responding to forces such as market prices, such as government subsidy policies, government procurement policies. They're responding to weather, and they're almost always responding to external drivers in making their decision, what to grow, what to irrigate, what not to grow. And that's something I've been very curious about. So most of my work has been around understanding how various policies, be it food policy, be it water policy, be it energy policies, have affected farmers' decision making, and how that in turn affects a whole host of things such as our food prices and the kind of consumer choices we make in our day-to-day lives. So I grew up partly in Delhi and in Kolkata, and I had the good fortune of having parents who were very particular about us, me and my sibling, paying attention to our studies. But more importantly, I think what worked even better was just the very vibrant discussions that we would have at home right from our childhood on all things such as societal issues, hunger, poverty, things such as politics. So right from my childhood, I would be very aware politically what's happening around us and how that affects our day-to-day lives. Similarly, our schools were I'm talking of the 80s and early 1990s, were far more mixed in the sense that we had students and classmates from all socioeconomic strata, and we got therefore exposed to a whole range of views and worldviews around, different things, different ways of life. So I think that was a big influence, just growing up within that diversity that existed, and with the schooling system being much more public-based schooling system. Mine was private school, but even then they were much more affordable than they are now today, for example. And just the diverse student body, the kind of teachers we had, all of those were very, very positive influence. And I think so I finished my school, then I went to Presidency College in Kolkata, where I studied geography, and after that I moved to Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, for my master's. And that's where I think that's where a lot of the work that I do today got influenced. So for me, one of the greatest takeaway from my studies in JNU was this questioning this whole concept of merit being something that's intrinsic to us. I mean, it's very easy to get into the belief that you are doing well in studies because you are so-called quote-unquote meritorious student. But I think the kind of education we got in a place like JNU helped us understand that merit is a social construct. I mean, our merit is a product of generations of having access to high quality education. For example, being upper caste brings with its own advantages, which often first generation learners from, say, backward classes often may not have had. So that the playing field is not level is something, a big realization that came to me at the young age of 19, 20 years when we entered the university, and that I think had an important effect in trying to, in the work that I do, I try to also understand water access and why is water access unequal, and it often comes down to these kind of structural inequities, and it becomes even harder then and then then it kind of becomes then we understand that many of the technocratic solutions that only focus on technologies without giving adequate importance to social justice, equity, are likely to fail. So I think JNU was a big influencer that way in making us understand the kind of differences in power, access, entitlement that exists in our society, and how through being just aware of those differences can make a huge difference to the work we are doing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, of course, certainly. I mean, my parents have been great motivators. It's kind of just setting up those goals and ambitions. Things like nobody from my family, in my parents' generation, I mean, they were all college graduates, but the very notion that you can go ahead and do a PhD was not something that they had in their generation. But I think from a very early age, my mother seeded this idea that I could be a doctor, as in be a PhD. Then I think the whole support, I decided to move. I was what they call in the Indian system a good student, and everybody is expected then to study natural sciences and STEM subjects. But I knew that I have a better affinity with social sciences. So when I chose to go to social science discipline, having been very influenced by some of my teachers in school, particularly, we had a fantastic history teacher. I mean, my parents were completely supportive. So that whole notion that the only options that you have are in terms of medical doctors and engineers, which seems to permeate a lot of Indian parents, I somehow very happily escaped that trap. So I could actually pursue the kind of studies and the kind of fields that I wanted to pursue. Then I think I have had very many very good influences in JNU. As I said, we had some of the most fantastic professors, very, very socially aware. Then my cohort in JNU, again, they came from such diverse socioeconomic background with such diverse life stories that I think I learned as much from my professors as I learned from my peers. And so that was, I think, a great influence. Then my first job, I started working with Professor Tushar Shah, who has done phenomenal work around water in India and in entire South Asia. So that was the first job I had taken up. It's not as if so in some ways my entry into water was more because that's the first job I got when I passed out, and just the kind of fascinating work he does really had a big influence on the kind of work I ended up doing eventually. So yes, lots of influences: parents, teachers, peer groups, work colleagues, supervisors. So it's all around. Yeah. Yes, I think like everybody else, I have faced challenges, but yes, uh, I mean, that's a good question. Let me think about it a bit. Yes, I think some of the challenges initially when you're starting out in your career, it's just not for me, but for most women, and particularly women of color working in an international context, is almost as if you have to prove yourself more than perhaps somebody else from some other more privileged background. And that's actually something we learned in JNU, and so that helped me put in perspective. So I tried not to take those the so-called barriers more personally. I understood that many of the barriers I was facing were actually structural barriers. Those barriers were there for me because of my gender, because of my ethnicity, because of maybe my disciplinary background, whatever. I mean, as a social scientist working in the world of natural scientists, as as a young brown woman starting out in a world of white men. I mean, all those barriers are much more structural and not so much personal. And I think that that really helped me move ahead and know that, progress, any one of us that makes a progress helps others who are coming behind us to walk in our footsteps. And of course, I mean, I also inherited that kind of a workplace from women who have walked that path before me. So there were lots of good examples to follow. Um, uh, uh, well, I think I could do more, but for the time being, what I do is try and reduce consumption, consume only, be much more conscious about what we are consuming. In my day-to-day life, we live in an apartment in Kolkata where space is really small, but in our very small way, I have been trying to compost all my vegetable waste. We are being careful with the way we use our electricity or our water, and yeah, but not far enough. I think there's just so much to do. I have been trying to grow vegetables and kind of mostly focus on being more sustainable in our consumption, but there's just so much more to do. And individual action is, I think, super important because that kind of inspires others. But at the same time, much more action is needed in terms of, incentivizing this behavior. For simple things like segregation of, say, solid waste. This is, I mean, so many of us can effectively do it right now. In the very small way in which I compost, I mean, there's a absolute joy in seeing, all those vegetable peels in 3 months' time turning into this beautiful black manure. But the thing is that it just needs more effort to do it, and having incentivizing those kind of things would go a long way in others to take it up. So individual sustainability is super important, but the point I'm trying to make is that we simply need more systems, more policies, more institutions in place to make these sustainable choices kind of more automatic. I think again, it's mostly been mentoring more and more young women who are joining the field of water, and making sure that there are more voices from the global south that comes to these discussions. So one of the recent things, and there is just so much of talent. It's not that it's any hard work or you have to go out and look very hard for those talented young men and women. They are just all around. So one of the things I was particularly pleased about in my role as the IPCC scientist, so I this time led the water chapter, co-led the water chapter along with 12 other scientists. And what it turned out that we did require, so the literature is so vast on climate change. To synthesize all of that, we realized that 12 authors that was handpicked by the IPCC was simply not enough for us to tackle the whole breadth of literature. So we kind of reached out to what we call contributing authors. And while selecting those contributing authors, we were very careful to make sure that there is adequate representation of men, women, global south, global north. And at the end, our chapter ended up having almost 50 plus of those contributing authors, and so many of them are early career researchers, which was like a very happy coincidence. And after the report was published, just the sheer number of just these early career researchers were very happy to have been a part of that. So that's just something, just trying to be more conscious. Similarly, when we are doing our hiring processes, as a manager, I often am on hiring panels, just trying to be very conscious of the structural differences and the fact that it's not a level playing field, and to try and influence those decisions in ways that flavors, people who are underrepresented is often, I find, my way of paying forward. I think I would be more careful about the impact of our choices that we make on climate. I think given, maybe make more conscious decision about consuming less, be careful about the kind of consumption decisions we make, and done it early on, not waited till I till I understood the literature much better. So I mean, that's something I think I would do. My advice would be, just don't get discouraged. It's things like, so we as researchers, we publish a lot, and it gets difficult, it's hard. The work we do, the field work we do, is often quite difficult. Then the academic rigor itself is quite hard, and it's easy to get discouraged, but just keep at it, because it's just the journey itself is worth it. So I would just say, yeah, be brave and develop a thick skin perhaps, and not take negative comments or criticisms too seriously, or yeah, so that's what it would be. That's an interesting one. And I wonder if there's one. So I think it's mostly um, make your decisions carefully, listen to your heart while making decisions, but possibly use your head to implement those decisions, because often making decisions solely based on rational reason, like basically decisions with your head without your heart being into it, makes them implementing those much harder. So yes, maybe yeah, using your emotional quotient, as well as, yeah, basically, for the things that are important, it's okay to be emotional and use your heart to make those decisions, but implementation always requires more thinking. So maybe that's it, but I don't know. Yeah, a lot. I mean, several of the people that I worked with in the past, and yeah, I don't know if I should mention one specific ones, but I have had some really good mentors who have encouraged me when I was younger. This includes a lot of my university professors, some my work supervisors and bosses. So when you are young and you are not sure if what you are doing is the best possible thing you can do, to having that kind of encouragement really helps. And that's the way I hope to also pay back, by providing a same level of encouragement and confidence in the young people who follow our footsteps.